Is there any real hope or any reason to think that there's any impetus for massive change on the part of the Republican Party, since it seems to be in control and likely to remain in control for the next 3 years?
Ramesh, wait, do you
Well,
want to take?
I mean, I think that's.
Go ahead, Bill.
No, that's obviously a question a lot of us have thought. No, I think it's 50-50 or better. The gerrymandering thing is totally overstated. I mean, if you just look at those, no, I'm just saying analytically, as a political science matter, in the last 4 or 5 congressional elections, there have been swings of 40, 50, and 60 seats. There could easily be a swing of 40 seats in 2018. There is gerrymandering on both sides. I think there will be. I will say it right now. I'll come back in 2 years, and you guys can laugh at me. The odds are right now that Republicans lose the House. They could easily lose 25 seats is nothing. That's just the average loss in a mid-year election. Usually the losses are greater in the first off-year election when a president and his party controls Congress.
But do you think that gerrymandering has benefited Republicans?
On net, it has a little bit. The main thing, the most important aspect of gerrymandering that has benefited Republicans was the insistence on having majority-minority districts, which is excessively consolidated, solid Democratic votes in inner cities into one district instead of putting it in 2 or 3 districts. And then a lot of other things have happened. But there are states that don't have gerrymandering and also have the same partisan split. So it's not actually, I think, anyway, the Senate doesn't have gerrymandering. There we have the fluke that there are so many more Democratic seats up this year. But I think they could lose the House. And I guess I'm a little more optimistic that you don't need to have a crashing defeat to have an awful lot of Republicans decide we can't have this going forward. So for me, the huge issue is 2020. If you're a Republican, you could have nominated. I'm proud of the people, the Republicans. I know this is like unpopular. I am perfectly happy to be part of a party that nominated Reagan, Bush, Dole, Bush, McCain, and Romney. They were all decent human beings. They were all impressive in many ways, human beings. They're not all perfect. I preferred other candidates some of those times in the primaries. That's a perfectly respectable political party to be part of. And I would say the same of most of the Republican senators and a decent number of the Republican House members and a lot of the Republican governors, incidentally. So then the question is, how do you get back to there from here? I agree it's a problem. 2020 is the big issue for me. If the Republicans nominate Trump again, then it's hard for someone like me to say, well, it's kind of just a one-off fluke. It was weird. He was lucky. He had bad opponents. It was he played his cards extremely well. Then he got an inside straight in the Electoral College and won the general election. And there, I think it's very important that the Republicans not nominate Trump in 2020. Now, I agree that right now it doesn't look like that will happen, but these things never. Lyndon Johnson did not look vulnerable 6 months in 1965, and he ended up not running for re-election.
But I don't know, Bill. You keep saying 4 years, but I mean, Ramesh, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well. Isn't it if the unemployment rate is low and if the economy is doing well? I mean, isn't that just the simple calculus?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that, I mean, so depends on which question we're answering here. If you want to think about sort of, does Trump leave a long-lasting mark on his party and fundamentally transform it? I think that what you would have to do is actually a little bit more than that. It's something that happens very rarely. Reagan did it by winning re-election and by having a successor win the election after that. That, I think, made for a long-lasting transformation of the Republican Party along the line, and then of American politics, really, along the lines that Reagan wanted. Clinton didn't quite succeed in doing that in his party, I think because of the way 2000 went, sort of a split decision that ended up going to Bush. It didn't happen to, George W. Bush, he tries to change the Republican Party. Compassionate conservatism seemed to be carrying all before it in the early 2000s. And that just totally washed away, even though he did win his second term.
Okay.
No, but I would just say, I just want to say, I think that underestimates the corrupting character of Trump. From my point of view, a Republican Party that's willing to stand by Trump and renominate Trump is a deeply problematic party. And someone like me who would still hope at this point that the Republican Party could be saved, I think would leave it. Now, I don't know if I speak for anyone more than 7 people or whatever, as McKay said. But I do think my kids and every 23-year-old, 26-year-old intelligent young people, then they look at the Republican Party and they say, right now they look at it and they say, ugh, God, Trump, that's what conservatism is, that's what the Republican Party is. But they also say, but you know what? I live in, Massachusetts, and Charlie Baker, he's a Republican and he's a pretty good governor. Or I turn on the TV and I see Nikki Haley at the UN and I think that's reasonable. Or I learn about some young Congresswoman, Elise Stefanik, in upstate New York, and I think, well, she's impressive. I think that gets harder if Trump gets renominated, and the possibility of saving the party, from my point of view, gets much difficult. So for me, 2020 is extremely important. Because the corrupting effect of Trump becomes, it's impossible to say once he gets renominated, well, that's not really the Republican Party. He's just the guy who got nominated and elected and then got renominated. Then he is the Republican Party. whether he succeeds or not, I mean, Ramesh is right, whether he succeeds or not as a president in transforming America, he is the Republican Party if you're nominated and renominated.